All right, got a good rush out of your system. My name's Harold. I'm an alcoholic. It's grateful to be here, and thank you for the privilege to come here. Everybody that is here. I have a sobriety date, April 7th, 1987. I have a home group in St. Louis, Missouri. It's called AA on the Rocks. Strong Three Legacy group in St. Louis on Wednesday nights. If you're ever in the Lou on a Wednesday, I hope you look us up, and love for you to come out. Love to host you. If we get a hold of you quick enough, we will get some mileage out of your sobriety. I promise you, we will put you to work, and we will do it fast and furious. If you're planning on coming to the next International, we were just talking about that a little bit ago. It'll be in 2030. It'll be in St. Louis. And if your time allows, your finances allow, your schedule allows, I would encourage you to come in on Wednesday, the day, before the whole thing starts, the pre-party before the party, because On the Rocks and probably some other groups will have a big hoedown going down on Wednesday night. So just put that in your calendar and think about that. It'll be here before you know it. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, George, for inviting us out and coming, and thank you for chairing, and thank you for Carl for coming and picking us up. And he's got a bum leg, and he's got a cast on the other leg. He's kind of like Festus from Gunsmoke, just kind of hobbling around, and he's still making it happen. And so we're grateful for him, and took us out to lunch. It's a privilege to be here with John. Known John for a long, long time, and had the privilege to do a lot of stuff in AA with John and his wife, and we're very well connected in a lot of ways. You'll get to hear that over the weekend. So, but I'm grateful to be here. I'm just here to share what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I've heard in the course of my time in recovery. I come from a great line of sponsorship. I've had 4 sponsors in recovery: Roy, Bill, Tom, and Steve. And 3 of those gentlemen have passed away. And Steve, my sponsor, is from Nashville, where John lives, or just outside Nashville, where John lives now. And Steve's been here before. I've seen his name, in one of the chairs, so I know he's been a part of this context before. Been to a lot of different suspects. There's a lot of these that have spun off in different states and different places over the years. It's always fun to come and get the enthusiasm, the rush, the energy, the commitment, the level of transparency that goes on in these spaces. And so if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, this is your first time to one of these events, we're glad that you're here. And then John and I are here just to be of service. So whatever, grab us, talk to us, and like we have all the answers. We're just a couple corn dogs, but we will, whatever we got, we're willing to share it. We're willing to be a part. We're here to be a part of what's going on, not just to be served, and we're just one among many. And I know he takes that approach, and I take that approach to our time. But it is a thrill to be here. I look forward to spending the weekend and just unpacking what it means to live a recovered-centered, spirit-centered, sober-centered, however you want to frame it, centered life that none of us were living when we got here, I can promise you. And what does that look like, and how's that come into shape, and all those things, and what are we still struggle with? What do we still wrestle with in our lives today, even after all these years? What still gets us, sometimes by the goat, and we really have to come back and humble ourselves sometimes, even after years and years of sobriety. Just coming here, flying here. I fly a lot, but I don't really care to fly necessarily. And I'm very judgmental. I don't know about you, but I get very judgmental in the airports, of people, especially the people when you go to line up to get in line, and the people that got, they stopped somewhere and got a cast or this or that so they could get on first. And there's 20 of them before they even get pre-boards. They got all these guys that look like they come out of the Star Wars bars with all this stuff on. And then you get on, I think it was 2018, I flew Southwest to get here. I think it was 2018 when they crashed and they cashed in on the peanuts. No longer we're going to serve peanuts. I can remember the captain getting on the mic saying that, as effective today, or our policy now is that we no longer serve those peanuts, in the bag. I used to love those peanuts, and then they come and they're out because somebody has an allergy. And he goes, and I know that upsets a lot of you people, but we got to honor those people who have that allergy. And I said, wow, you think they're pissed now? Wait till they find out about my allergy. They're really going to be bumming out when they find out about my allergy. And they can't drink on the plane anymore, because things might happen if the allergy breaks out. But no, I'm grateful to be here. I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1979 in the Department of Corrections, and that's where I was introduced to AA. I just come out of Boonville Correctional Center, and I was picked up on another charge and taken to Northern Missouri, and I was in a holding cell in a detention center, Dare County Detention Center. And a couple of 5 members from Alcoholics Anonymous brought a meeting into that space. And it was my first time. Never heard of AA, never been exposed to AA, never knew nothing about it. But these guys brought AA into that facility. They had a captive audience in Adair County Detention Center. You know, there was nowhere you were going. You were a part of it. And I couldn't tell you anything I heard with these, but what I do know about alcoholics especially, or any broken person, but definitely alcoholics, where they're walking off the streets or they're in a confined space, doesn't matter, that we as newcomers listen with our eyes and we think with our feelings. And I couldn't tell you anything I heard with these, but I can tell you everything I heard with these at that time. And I think it's on page 105 of Bill's Sees It. There's a little excerpt from one of Bill's writings right in the middle of the page. It says chief responsibility. And it goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, which I'll do a lot this week for the sake of time, but it goes on to say that our chief responsibility is to deliver an adequate demonstration of Alcoholics Anonymous to the newcomer. That's our chief responsibility as an individual, as a district, as an area, as usual suspects sitting here this weekend. It's our chief responsibility is to do that and to take it seriously. And I didn't understand any of that when I got here. But that demonstration was enough. I didn't stay sober at that point in time, and I'll talk a lot more about that. But it was a demonstration, and it's what drew me back. That whole experience, just that one experience, drew me back to that same town and same location, looking for help 7 years later when I finally burnt my life to the ground. But similar to John, I got a plea bargain. I had a parole officer. I had a prosecutor who understood what I was suffering from a lot deeper than I understood what I was suffering from. And they come in and they offer me a plea bargain. Here's how the plea bargain went. We can either charge you with this new crime, revoke your parole, send you back to where you came from for 2.5 more years, or we have a treatment program here in this town called Care Unit, and we're willing to forego all that if you'll be willing to go into treatment for 30 days. Now, I quit school when I was 13, but I had enough math, right, to know that 2.5 years was 30 days was a heck of a lot shorter than 2.5 years. That was a very fast plea bargain, you know. And off I went into treatment in 1980. By this time, the calendar had flipped to 1980. So I was taken from there right to the treatment center. I walked into the treatment, and it was a small treatment center. It's rural Missouri. It's right on the Iowa border. So there probably wasn't just this little group of guys right here. This is it. This was all that was in treatment. Most of them were a lot older than I was. And I was so far removed from conceding I was powerless over anything, much less alcohol. But I was there to do my time. And back then, you know, especially in mid-America, rural America for sure, your AA program wasn't very clinical. It was, you know, treatment wasn't. It was just a place for you to detox. And it was really AA-centered. Mostly the people that worked there were AA members. You didn't have to have all the licensing and credentialing you do today to be in those spaces necessarily. And the big book was paramount. The stats were paramount. And you went to meetings. And that's really what the program was. That was what they were offering. And they didn't have a lot of meetings inside there, so they'd put you on these vans and they'd ship you off to these little local towns and to go to AA meetings. And I'd be on that bus. It felt like an Oates bus, you know, for senior living. And I'm back there in the back seat, my little pug nose smashed against the thing with a little tear coming out of my eye. Poor, pathetic me, you know, off to the treatment center. And I remember going to my first off to the AA meeting. I remember going to my first AA meeting in La Plata, Missouri. I mean, it's a little, blink your eyes, you're through the town. There's not even a gas station there, I don't think. But they take us to La Plata, Missouri. And I walk in to the basement, and there was a woman that was very iconic in mid-America at that time, mid-Missouri at that time. Her name was Millie Mays. And Millie looked like Mrs. Claus. That's what she looked like. She had big white hair, big rosy cheeks, beautiful soul. She was just illuminated a bright light from miles away. And she greeted me at the door, welcomed me to the meeting, and she even bought me an Orange Crush soda pop. I remember it like it was yesterday, out of the vending machine. So I had this Orange Crush soda. I'm sitting there in this meeting with just a small gathering, mostly farmers, a lot of people in overalls, you know, farmers in that space. And everybody had to talk because there wasn't very many people in the meeting. And so I was forced to talk, and it came my turn. And I said something to the effect, you know, I'm here because the DOC said I had to be here. And I only got so many more days. I'm checking them on the map, you know, on the calendar. I only got so many more days, and you will never see me again because I am not like you people. I just vomit that all over their meeting. And this Mrs. Claus-looking figure turned on me right in the meeting. I mean, she just grew horns, fangs, and a tail right there, right in front of everybody. And she looked at me right in the meeting, just eyeball to eyeball, and she just said, "Just keep drinking, you dumb little bastard. It's all going to happen to you." And she became my first resentment, Alcoholics Anonymous, another mess. But if you stay here long enough, the impossible becomes possible. And many of you have been here a long time, and you know that's true. And so many years later, when she had 30 years of sobriety, she invited me to come and speak at her 30th anniversary in Shelbina, Missouri. That's how cool this thing is if you stick around. So, long story. But my home plan was the Thomas boys picked me up from treatment. And back then, we rode in pickup trucks. We were all Ozark Mountain hillbillies. And I'm sure in this part of the country it was no different. You could ride in the back of the truck. So the cab would be full of guys, but the back was full of guys. And this whole truck full of people pull up to the treatment center, Johnny and Tommy Thomas, to pick me up from treatment. And I hop in the back. We're headed to the Sheraton River to one of the best parties I've ever been to in my life. And they handed me a big plastic jug of pure grain alcohol, Everclear, with some kind of Kool-Aid mix, and they called it jungle juice. And they said, "Welcome home, brother." And I literally within minutes of leaving treatment, I'm already pounding that and eating something with Snoopy on it and who knows what all. And went to the Sheraton River to one of the best parties. I'm serious, one of the best parties I've ever been to in my life. It was summertime, tons of girls, hundreds of people, Southern rock band, keggers, hog roast, you name it. It was all going down. It was like paradise, at that point. And I walked down to the river that night with that coin I had just got for 30 days. With those guys. And I remember taking that coin, had no emotional attachment to this coin whatsoever. It was like dead weight. And I just took that thing and skipped it across the river, pounded my chest, made some hillbilly rebel yell. Like, we got victory over treatment, we got victory over the DOC, and thank God I'll never have to do that ever again the rest of my life. And everybody's like, "Hell yeah, brother." And the party was on. That was the last time I thought about not drinking for a long time. But that was my introduction to recovery, to AA, to what a sober life looked like. None of it was attractive, and I wasn't interested, pretty much. I was born on the Oklahoma-Kansas border to the greatest woman on the planet, which happened to be my mom. My mom passed away in 2015, but she was the greatest winner in my life. She was a woman who was married to two different alcoholics, one in St. Louis where she had a son and two daughters, and was a very ugly, nasty alcoholic situation. You all know what that looks like. She came out of that, and somewhere when those kids were between 10 and 14 years of age, she was out. She just left. She left the marriage. She said, "I'm just out," and she gone. And didn't say goodbye or nothing, just exited. MIA for 10 years. Nobody knew if my mom was alive or dead. Didn't know where she was at. And she surfaced 10 years later on the other side of the state in Nevada, Missouri, a little farm town, and they had a state mental hospital there, pretty popular till about the early 90s when it closed. But she was a patient there for quite a while, my mom was. And somewhere, I don't know if it was before she went in or after she got out, but somewhere in there she met my dad. She got hooked up with him. They got married. I came out of that marriage. But somewhere between the ages of 2 and 3, my mom would just hit her own bottom with alcoholism. It was this another guy, same thing. She was just at in St. Louis. She ran him off. And my mom turned her will and life over to the care of God as she understood God, which was her Catholic roots. That's how she grew up. She just surrendered herself to that way of life. She didn't have any her parents died really young. She didn't have any siblings. She had no aunts or uncles, nobody. It was just my mom, all alone, divorced twice, 60s, no education, pretty tough way to live. And that's where my mom found herself. But she wasn't going to give up, and she turned to God, and she turned her will and life over to God, something that we're all asked to do as we get here. And she did it, and she never wavered on it until the day she died in 2015. My mom just continued to blossom and grow and mature and just lived this incredible life until she died in 2015. I'm forever grateful for her surrender. At the time I was coming into the world, she was surrendering her life to God. Because it hadn't been, who knows how my life would have ultimately ended up. But we didn't have any money. All we had, we lived in a quadplex. We shared a bathroom with the lady next door. But I had a mom who told me she loved me every day of my life. I had a mom who tried to get me. She wanted me to know about this God. She wanted me to have a relationship with this Jesus-looking God. She wanted me to live a Jesus-centered life. So she robbed from Peter, wrote a bad check to Paul to get me into this little Catholic school in Nevada, Missouri. And I went there from kindergarten to the 4th grade. And I'm not one of these guys that suffered church hurt or has a huge resentment towards religion, or come here as like a recovering Catholic. That's not my story. It's not my experience. And as far back as any inventory I ever could look back at that stage of my life, I loved all that stuff. I loved going to Mass. Even though you had to go every day, I loved it. I loved it. I loved church enough I would come home and play church. Anybody else play church? Any church? Anybody humble enough to admit that one? No, hands are going up. But I would go home and play church. I put the TV trays up, make an altar out of them. I remember doing that. Throw an Afghan or a blanket over it so it looked like an altar. Dump the fruit out of the fruit bowl, fill it full of potato chips for the Eucharist, Get some great Kool-Aid for the wine. Get a cheap towel out that I used for a stole. A Bible out we never read, I can promise you, but we had one sitting on the coffee table. A few guys come over to the long house of worship. We'd save a few souls. It was a great day. This is how my life's starting out. I'm into rock and roll. I started playing drums and percussion when I was 5 and was very gifted at it. Just something that I had that gift, and it stayed with me all through my drinking well into recovery, and it served me well for a long, long time. I was I love sports. I was a huge baseball fan, and I loved to play baseball, and I was decent at baseball. Had I not met King Alcohol, who knows, I might have been able to go on and play pro ball or some level of pro ball. I don't know if I'd ever been good enough to play for the Cardinals, but I bet I could have played for the Cubs. Just saying, I bet I could have played for the Cubs. We were friends a little while ago. Yeah, make sure you lock your door tonight, Long. But no, I mean, in all sincerity, this is how I'm growing up. I'm growing up this way. And but somewhere right around between 7 and 8 years old is when my life changed. It's when I look back at my life at any inventory, and really, when we talk about, John talked about it, every AA member talks about it from this space of this disconnect that they had in their life. I would call it the great disconnect. That's what it is. It's separation. If you're a person of faith, call it spiritual separation. If you're more of a person of reason, just call it separation. But whatever makes the world go around, I wasn't connected to it. I felt it. I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't explain it. But there was this huge cavity in my soul. I would define the soul as our mind, our will, and our emotions. And this is when I look at an inventory, this is where it shifted for me. This is where I could really see that coming out. And my mom dropped a bomb. She says, look, we're going to move. I said, where are we moving to? She says, we're going to move towards St. Louis. I said, why are we doing that? She says, because you got a brother and 2 sisters you don't know about. And it pulled back the blinds on a part of my mom's life I never knew existed. And so there was a level of trust that got compromised. There was a level of insurance. What is life even about? What is all this? And we move from this little quadplex where we shared a bathroom with the lady next door into this big mobile home court outside of St. Louis. And then we lived in the very back of the trailer park where all the beat-up trailers were at, where they called everybody trailer trash. And we moved into a trailer, which for a lot of people would have been a downer. For me, it was an upper. I'm not alone. I have my own bathroom now, and I had room for all my drum equipment. So it was a step up for me. But my life changed. My life changed because I was no longer in a small little rural town. I wasn't in a little Catholic school with less than 100 kids where I knew everybody. Now I'm in a school with thousands of kids. I'm in a public school system, and my life changed. When I show up, I look like a country kid. I don't look like everybody else. This is the peace love movement. This is the time of the Jesus revolution. This is the hippie revolution. Everybody's got long hair. Everybody's wearing bell-bottom pants where I lived. I didn't look like any of that. But I can promise you it didn't take me very long before I did, because this great disconnect started to rule my life. What you thought of me paralyzed me. And I can promise you every tattoo, every scar, every piercing I got in my body was driven by that separation. And that I would call it that delusion of inequality, that who I am is not enough. And it absolutely drove my life. It drove it. Book defines it several different ways all throughout the book, and we'll reference some of those over the weekend. But this is what's driving my life. So immediately I'm telling my mom, I don't look like everybody else here. She goes, what do you mean? I said, I don't, everybody else has got cool clothes and blue jeans, and I don't look like that. And she said, you're fine, but I wasn't fine. And so immediately I got me some bell-bottom pants. I got the brown suede boots with the red shoestrings. I got the Billy Jack t-shirt, the black t-shirts, because Billy Jack was a badass on TV at the time. I got a blue jean jacket. I ripped the sleeves off. I made a peace sign on it. I had a USA patch. I took the thumbtack out of my kid's poster, pierced my ear, grew my hair real long, made me a headband out of a piece of belt. I had real bad gap teeth. I had freckles. I had pimples. I looked like some kind of freaked out version of Alfred E. Newman or Howdy Doody. That's what I looked like. Seriously, if you look at those with long hair, that's what I looked like. Trying to just fit in. And I had a mom who didn't have any education, so she worked whatever job she could hustle. So she worked a lot, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. So she was never home. Leave in the morning, be home sometimes 9 or 10 o'clock at night. You ate out of crock pots. You ate a lot of hamburger helpers. We were talking about pork and beans and hot dogs. You ate whatever you could come up with. You survived. Pot pies, frozen dinners, frozen pizzas, you name it. But I just did whatever I wanted to do. I just grew up on the streets. And being a rock and roll drummer, it got me into spaces that I really had no business belonging in. And I was in the jazz band, but I got in some rock and roll bands, and I'm hanging out with older teens and people in their 20s and people in their 30s, and I'm getting introduced to the dark side of life. The sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, tobacco, all of it. Before I'm even a teenager, I'm experiencing all these things. And I had a friend, Steve. He was a band member, and he was having a party at his house. I'll never forget it. And he said, "Hey, man, I'm going to have a party. Come to the house." And I was just 12 years old at this time. And I went to his house, and his parents were in Florida, and he's behind the bar playing the big shot. And there's girls, and there's dope, and there's smoke, and it's crazy, and it's obnoxious. And I come in, I immediately go right to the bar where he's at, and he asked me the all-important question, "What are you drinking?" Well, nobody ever asked me that. I mean, my mom drank her whole life. My mom always had cheap beer in the refrigerator. She grew up during the Depression, and she never had any money, so whatever was on sale, you bet she had it. She always had a fifth of Old Crow whiskey underneath the sink. Some of the old-timers call that the Dirty Bird. She smoked Virginia Slims. If you ask me, did you ever sip some of your mom's booze? Did I smoke some of her cigarettes? Did I drink some altar wine as a young altar boy? Yes to all those things. But I wouldn't count any of that stuff as my first drink. You know, when I talk about the first drink, I'm talking about the drink that changed my life. Yeah, I mean, it changed my life. This is the night it happened. And I asked that guy, he says, "What are you drinking?" I said, "I don't know. I guess whatever you're drinking, I'm drinking." And he made me a big glass of sloe gin and Coke. I'll never forget it. And I went over and sat down with that big glass of sloe gin and Coke, and I finally got the courage to take a pull off it. And it tasted like cough syrup. It tasted like Robitussin. I said, "This isn't that big a deal." And I hit it a little more, and eventually the magic started to happen. That warmth started to come over my body like I never had before. I started to get a smile on my face like I never had before. And I hit it a little harder. The smile got a little bigger. And it hit a little more, and it got even bigger. And eventually the smile just went all the way around my head and touched back here, right? It was the effect. It was a relief that I've been looking for my whole life. And in a very delusional way, it seemed to solve this disconnect that I had with you, with them, with her, with Mom, with God. Pick it. It solved all that. And I didn't say it out loud, but in my subconscious, I pretty much said, all this, not just the effect about alcohol, but the whole environment. Bill would, call it the gay chatter, was one of his references for this term. I loved all of it. I pretty much just said, I'm going to do this right here for the rest of my life. And I pretty much set out to do just that. For the rest of my life, I'm going to do this right here. I loved it. I got as sick as I've ever been off alcohol that night. I said my first plea bargain prayer that night, or foxhole prayer. You know how those go. God, if you get me out of this, what do we say? I'll never do it again, right? And if you're really alcoholic, you add this to it. And this time, I really mean it, right? Because you burnt that prayer to the ground. You've wasted that prayer early in the game. I mean, you threw that card out. But I got so sick. I didn't drink the next day, the next week, or the next month. But my life shifted that day. And I wanted to live that life. And so I set out to do that. Even before I was a teenager, I set out to go down that road. And we didn't have any money. I already told you that. So it led to a life of crime, and it led me down some very dark roads very fast. And then the Department of Corrections took over the title to my soul before I was a teenager, and they held that title long into recovery. And what happened in all those years of active addiction and alcoholism and criminal behavior cost me a lot. And it followed me right into recovery, and it paid a lot of consequences even in recovery. And we'll talk about some of those things and those consequences tomorrow and the Sunday. Count the cost. Because that's what alcoholism is. It's three-dimensional. It's fun with problems, and then it's just problems. And those different tiers last different for everybody. Some drink for a long time, and it's fun for a long time. Some, it's fun with problems immediately. That was me. I mean, there was consequences immediately. But we just don't see how delusional it is. We don't see how costly it is. And you could just kind of summarize it this way. You walk into the bar one day and say, I'd like to have a cold beer. What's it going to cost? It's going to cost you $2. That sounds reasonable. I'll be glad to pay it. And you drink the beer. But the next time you come in, as the progression sets in, you go, what's it going to cost me? This time it's going to cost you your job. It's going to cost you your education. That don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll gladly pay it. And you pay it. And then the next time you come in, what's it going to cost me? Well, it's going to cost you your freedom. Well, that don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll gladly pay it. And then one day you walk in, so what's it going to cost you this time? Well, it's going to cost you your health. Yeah, that don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And eventually one day you walk in, what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you your life. It don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. I was willing to pay it many times. I put my life on the line many times. I know you did too. In many different ways, we put our lives on the line. We're willing to pay it all, baby. Push all the chips in. I'm in to live this life. And if you look at that in that scenario, in that description, that illustration of progression, it looks totally insane. Why would anybody do that? But if you take your active alcoholism and you put it with that, it fits like a glove. That's just my life. It's total insanity. There's none of it that makes any sense unless you're really trying to seek something that only that seemed to give you. And that's the only thing that gave me the book would say, the relief from the care, boredom, and worry of my life was that, the effect produced by alcohol. So any remedy, any solution that was even minutely suggested, we're not going to drink anymore, I wasn't interested in it. And I ran from that. And I'd step on you, step over you, run over you, it didn't matter, to continue that way of life. And it cost me a lot. I burned a lot of bridges, I broke a lot of hearts, so did you. That's why we're all here this weekend. It was a costly thing. And I quit school when I was 13. I left home for good when I was 15, never to return home. There was a drifter in the town I was in at the time. His name was Scotty. Scotty was from Austin, Texas. And he was just a drifter. He was just a gypsy. He had an old UPS van that he had turned into a living quarters. He just did whatever he wanted. He was just a long-haired hippie. He's probably in his mid-40s. Big, tall guy, skinny guy, big, long hair, just loved to drink and raise hell. And he was headed back to Austin where his family was from. I said, man, can I go with you? And it's just hard to imagine that I'm not even old enough to drive a car yet. And I'm leaving with this guy. And I take off with this guy, and we head to Texas. And I lived all over Texas for a while. And I was with him for a short time, and we split up, and I ended up with some other guys. And then I ended up in Tennessee, and I was in Nashville for a while, and in Knoxville, Tennessee for a while, all as a fugitive, all on the run. It wasn't living the dream, for sure. But I ended up in Acworth, Georgia. There's Charlie Daniels, great country artist that I love dearly. 1979 wrote a song called The Devil Went Down to Georgia. You guys know that song, right? Looking for a soul to steal. Well, he found me. He found me in Acworth, Georgia. And I lived in Red Barn Trailer Court with a bunch of redneck rejects from the South. People from Carolinas and Kentucky and Virginia, Texas, Tennessee. Nobody really from the state of Georgia on my street. How bad was it? I lived next door to three guys named Pork Chop, Hollywood, and Screwdriver. That should give you a real indication how life's going when you're living to guys like that. But it was there. It was there. I mean, looking at any inventory in my life, it was there that I had my first moment of, I don't even want to call it clarity, but I would call it desperation, and I would call it, a willingness to want to live differently than I was living. And I'd been a drummer my whole life, played in honky-tonks and clubs and you name it, bars and parties of all kinds. And even when I wasn't in those places playing music, I loved to go to those places. I was a bar guy. I loved the saloons. You could call me a saloon-a-tick, right? I mean, I loved those places. And I was in there every chance I got. And I was a blackout drinker from day one, so blacking out was just part of drinking. Drinking and driving was part of drinking. Hustling and fighting and stealing and whatever. It was all part of just what you did in that lifestyle. And I woke up from a blackout one Saturday. It was a Saturday morning. that I woke up, been out all night. It was wintertime. I had on cowboy boots, blue jeans, a flannel shirt, and a beige vest. I didn't even make it to my bedroom. I was just laid out on the floor. And I woke up with a big tomato head. That's what we call it, a hangover in the South. And I had this big tomato head. I'm 19 years old at the time. And I wake up. I don't know where I've been or what's going on, but I look down and I got dry blood all over my hands, all over my vest. And I'm trying to figure out what happened to me. And I couldn't figure out what happened. And I had, but what happened didn't happen all the time, but it happened sometimes, is I'd be out these honky-tonks, and if I was drinking hard liquor or mixing it with something else, I had a big mouth, and it wasn't uncommon before the night was out that somebody wanted to punch me at least once. So I had that gift. I don't know if any of you had that gift, but I had that gift, Yeah, you had that gift, Rick. And and I had that gift. So I figured somebody just kicked the Doc's Not Nasty out of me. So I go in the bathroom, I'm trying to figure out where I'm bleeding from, and I can't figure it out until I get undressed. And then I realize somebody sliced me all the way around my arm and stabbed me in my rib cage. To this day, I couldn't tell you what happened that night. But what happened next, I think, is the important part. And if you're newer here tonight, this is the crux of alcoholism. And we toss a word around in AA, denial, a lot. But it's a word you only find twice in the big book. Once on page 10 in Bill's story, and once in the spiritual appendix. Both times talking about denying a power greater than ourselves. The way our book really treats this malady, this illness, this disease, if you would, is way past denial. Denial is, I know this gentleman's over here recording for us and doing a fine job. I know he's in the room, but I'm not going to look at him. But I know he's in the room. But the way our book describes alcoholism is way past that. It talks about it being on the basis of delusion and illusion, meaning I can't see myself for what I really am, and I can't differentiate the true from the false. And it's that wrestling with the illness that kills most people that have it. As we sit here tonight, there's millions, if not billions, of people trying to get the relief produced by alcohol or some mind-altering substance. Millions of people. We all know it. Many of those people will compromise their life forever tonight. Some will die. Some will do something that they wish they wouldn't even have woke up from. That's all going to happen tonight. Hopefully it doesn't happen to somebody we love or somebody that's been in our circles, but we know the realities of that. That's just the hardcore truth because of this manifestation. I went out on the front porch, and it was the first time in my life that I can ever remember since I started abusing alcohol and relying on it for the relief of care, boredom, and worry in my life, that I ever had any kind of desire not to live this way anymore. I'm full of emotion. I'm crying. I'm shaking. I can't even hold a cigarette, and I'm mumbling something to the effect, I got to do something different than what I'm doing. But the problem is, if you're truly alcoholic, if you're truly powerless over something that's mind-altering, that you're heavily addicted to, and there's nothing between you and it, if there's nothing that can get between you and it, you're going to succumb to it every single time of your life. And there was nothing between me and King Alcohol. Nothing. And I love what the early founders of our book did. They took an old English character named John Barleycorn, and they attached him to our literature. They even mentioned him in our traditions. And that personification works for me. Because that's what it felt like almost. Like John Barleycorn, the great compromiser. Don't even care if you come to this retreat. Don't even care if you go to meetings. As long as you don't go live out this stuff. Just stay where you're at. And this is what it was like. And I'm sitting there mumbling to myself, I got to do something different. It's almost like he's whispering in my ear, you know what, kid, you're right. You do got to do something different. But before you do anything drastic, grab your old army jacket and let's walk up here to the Magic Market and get a quart of beer and a pack of smokes. And that sounded like a really refreshing, sane idea. To anybody in their right mind, they go, you're completely out of your mind. You've lost your marbles. But it sounded real. It sounded relevant. And I went and got the jacket, and I started walking up to the Magic Market. I didn't even wash the blood off my hands. And as I started to walk up to the Magic Market, that sense of ease and comfort came over me before I ever got there. I'm already feeling better before I ever got there. To the point I'm almost skipping to the liquor store. And I got the booze that we always get. I got the bottle. I got the smokes. I come out, stood out there shaking and twisted that top, made that noise we all love, and that spirit of John Barleycorn come out of that bottle. And I remember taking it and taking a big old pull off it and making that big pucker face we always make that first drink of the day. And that was the last time I had thought about not drinking for a long time. And that's alcoholism. And it had me by the throat and against the wall. It did everything but kill me. And I hitchhiked to Marietta, Georgia. I got sold up, and again, that would be the last time I thought about not drinking for a long time. I made my way back to St. Louis in 1985. In 1987, this period of my life happened really fast, about 8-10 weeks tops. I got arrested for a 4TWI conviction. A few weeks later, I was on the east side of St. Louis, where all the gentlemen clubs are, and the rock and roll bars, and the discos, and all that stuff were at. Playing music and coming home wee hours in the morning. I'm passed out in the back seat in the passenger side of the car with my bandmates, and the next thing I know, we're involved in this horrific car accident with another vehicle, and everybody in that other vehicle lost their life that night. And when I got home from that accident, which the sun had been up for a long time, I was just a crushed human being. It was just like somebody took out my soul and cut it in half. As I sat in that beat-up old apartment in St. Louis, there was nothing between me and King Alcohol. Nothing. And it didn't happen as fast as the walking up to that liquor store like I did in Georgia, but it was before an hour was up. I was already in the refrigerator. I was already digging through the drawers. I was already looking for some kind of relief to take away the intense shame and the guilt and the care and the boredom and the worry. And I found it. And I suppressed that, and I'm behind the wheel of a car again just a few weeks later to be arrested again. And I had the same judge, same jurisdiction, parole violations, felony DWI charges, and I'm on my way back to the penitentiary. And as I was in St. Louis County Jail, I was on my knees in a cell and in my underwear at the time when this happened. And I was just a broken human being. And I got on my knees, and I just said the most honest prayer I ever said in my life. It's a prayer that I heard countless times from this podium. Heard it millions of times, and it's a 3-word prayer. Call it the prayer of desperation. Here you go, John. Thanks. Call it the prayer of desperation, whatever you want to call it. But it simply sounds like this. God help me. God help me. Right? And I don't even know if I said please that night. I just said God help me. But from that moment till now, all these years later, I've never found it necessary to pick up another drink from that. That's almost 39 years ago. And what was the difference between that prayer and all the other prayers? And the difference really was, I think it was just honest. The book says that God doesn't make too hard of terms for those who honestly seek him. And this is I'd sought God as a plea bargain, as a Bush League pinch hitter, as our book would talk about, as a closer, come out, I need you to come out of the bullpen, get me out of this jam, but never just I'm done. And I was just done. And I didn't have nobody to call. I hadn't talked to my mom in years. There was nobody to call. We didn't have smartphones back then. And even if I did, there was nobody to call. Nobody. But I finally was able to get out, and I made my way back to northern Missouri, where I was at in 1980, because that's where I listened with my eyes, And I went back there for 2 reasons. One, it was familiar, and number 2 was I was in a lot of trouble. I didn't need anybody. I didn't need an attorney or any rocket scientist to sit down and say, son, you need to go to treatment. You need something to stand in front of that judge and plead for mercy. I knew that before I even went. So I went to the treatment center. And I had seizures. I started having seizures when I was 17 from alcohol withdrawal. Didn't happen all the time. I discovered the morning drink, solved those most of the time. But here I was detached from alcohol and in treatment, and I had another really bad seizure, enough that I busted out my tooth and a piece of my tooth and got stitches in my head and in my back from when I fell. And so I had to stay a little extra in detox. But finally the time came when there was a knock at my door, and John mentioned his Ebby. Well, my Ebby's name was Gary. And Gary was about 55, probably somewhere right around there, 2.5 months sober. He didn't come in there to be my sponsor. He didn't come there to work steps with me. He just came there because he was on fire with 2.5 months of sobriety. And he said, hey, man, he just walked in and said, I'm Gary. And he had a clipboard in his hand. He says, you're on the list. I said, the list for what? He said, the list to go to AA meeting. I said, man, I'm not going to no AA meeting. He says, you're not? And I said, no, I'm not. I don't have no interest in that whatsoever. I really wasn't there to be sober necessarily, or definitely be sober for the rest of my life. Furthest thing from my mind. I was just in trouble. I was scared. That's why I was in that treatment center. And so he gracefully left, but he came back a few minutes later, a little bit more sarcastic this time. He come in, he just opened the door, just stuck his head in. That's all he stuck in. He looked at me, and I'm sitting on the bed. He just looks at me with this dumb look. He goes, do me a favor. I said, yeah, what's that? He says, why don't you smile and get it over with? And then he just walked out. And I thought, what the hell is that? Nobody's ever said nothing like that to me. And our book says that one alcoholic can win the confidence of another in a very short period of time when nobody else could do it. And he won my confidence. I didn't know that's what happened, but literally within minutes, I'm looking for my, everything I could to get ready to go find this guy. So I take off and I'm looking for him. I'm scouring the halls of the treatment center. I finally found him. I said, hey, man. He goes, yeah. And I said, you still going to that meeting? He goes, yeah. I said, man, that is awesome. He goes, why is that so awesome? I said, because I want to go with you. He goes, man, he was super excited. Then he goes, man, that's great. I said, why is that so great? He goes, because I can't get anybody else to go with me, right? And I knew I swallowed the hook, right? Hook, line, and sinker on that. And so I was already committed by that point. And so there's a little 2-story treatment center, this little town, Kirksville, Missouri. And we go down to his car, and he had an alcoholic car. We could take the basket and pass it this side of the room, pay for that car. It was no exaggeration, it was a 1970 pea green Plymouth Duster that was held together by rust. The floorboards rust out, no exhaust in his car. I mean, trash everywhere, box speakers, hot wire stereo, just as pathetic of a car as you could ever get in. And we get in this car, and you have to drive downtown where the town square is. Just off the square is all the churches where they have the AA meetings. So we have to go several blocks to get down there. So he cranks his car up, whom, no exhaust, and we take off, and this thing is loud, it's obnoxious. Carbon monoxide's pouring through the floorboard. You're trying not to die from asphyxiation. You're just hoping you could even get there. And he's got a smile on his face that wraps around, man. He's pumped. He's got the new guy. He's going to show up. He's got credit. He's got street credit with his homies at the home group. And he's so excited I'm with him. And he starts giving me the AA pitch. He starts telling me why he's on fire and how great his life is since he quit drinking. And I think I coined the phrase right there. I'm like, dude, I hate to break it to you, man. It's exactly what I said to him. I said, to be honest, it looks like your life sucks to me. And alcoholics are quick, man. He didn't take him no time. He said, yeah, well, tell me about your car. Yeah, I don't even have a car. Yeah. And the rumor is you got a big trial you got to go back to. How's that working out for you? So he just immediately got on the defensive and put me in my place. But we got to the meeting. He says, hey, man, this is a guy with 2.5 months of sobriety. Very prophetic stuff. He said, hey, man, we're going to go in this meeting tonight. I just want to give you a tip. I said, what's that? He goes, if they would call on you, let's hope they don't call on you, but if they call on you, all I want you to do is say your name's Harold and you're an alcoholic. That's it. Don't add anything to it. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're from the Ozark Mountains, correct? I go, yeah. He goes, well, we probably know you smoked some of this and snorted some of that and huffed some of that. And being from the Ozark Mountains, you probably slept with a few farm animals too. He's trying to, he goes, we know what alcoholism means. It's got a big definition. But just be Harold the alcoholic. Can you do that? I said, yeah, I can do that. And I've been Harold the alcoholic ever since. I never had to bow the traditions, Nazis, or any of that, getting lost with, acronyms and initials behind my name. Just been Harold the alcoholic from day one. But I came into the meeting, and what I know in my experience today for sure, that there's 3 types of people that come to AA. There's those who make it happen, there's those who watch it happen, and there's those who don't know what's happening at all, right? And I've been all 3 of those cats. I had no idea what was going on here. I was clueless to what was going on. And I went in and I sat down in this meeting, somebody I'd never met in my life, and I had this question, and it's a fair question. I tell newcomers this all the time. Here's the question. How long do we got to come here? That was my question. That was a dead honest question. How long do we got to come here? Because I'm thinking time, program, 6 months, 60 days, 9. How long does this last? And he was kind of perplexed by my question, but his response was very prophetic. He looked at me and he says, man, you got to come till you want to. And I'm like, man, I'm thinking to myself, I don't even want to be here tonight, much less tomorrow night. And I damn sure don't want to be here when I look like you, is what I'm thinking about. And, almost 39 years later, I look just like that guy today. But I did my time there. I came back to St. Louis. I didn't go to AA. This Ebby of mine, this Gary, saved my life because he was persistent. He kept calling me on the landline because we didn't have smartphones. And he'd ask me the question, did you go to AA? And I was honest. I said, no, I didn't go. Why? I said, Gary, I don't know why. He says, no, seriously, why? I said, I don't know why. All I cared about was the trial I had coming up in June of 1987. That's the only thing I cared about. And he would say things like, Harold, your life depends on it. And I knew that was a true statement, with every inch of my fiber, I didn't want that to be a true statement. But finally, I got the courage to go to AA. And I came to AA, and I watched AA happen for a long time, for almost 3 years that I was here. I came to AA, and I liked you people. I got a rock and roll band right away. I had a sober band, killer band called Alliance. Just killed it. It was a lot of fun. Had sober softball teams. Went to sober parties, sober functions, chased the sober girls, did all the sober materialistic things. But I was on step none, you know. And if you're in a 12-step program on step none, that's not very productive, right? If you were at the International in Georgia, I'll never forget it, the person who spoke on Friday night from Australia said, you know, I was doing everything right in AA, but 12 things. And I busted out laughing. I said, that's exactly my life. You saw me, you think I was running for president of AA. Because I was everywhere, you know, but I was on step none. And you can only live on fellowship sobriety so long, in my experience. Eventually, you know, when you quit, see, that's part of the delusion. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Do all these things. Meeting makers make it. You say all that verbiage and all that vocabulary. I didn't want a sponsor. I had a probation and parole officer since I was 11 years old, and I still had one. I'm not going to volunteer to ask somebody to have say-so in my life. I'm not doing that. I've been under the care, custody, and control of somebody else my entire life. And I'm not just going to say, hey, you want to tell me what to do some more? I need another person to tell me what to do, which I did, but I didn't know that. I wasn't interested in that. So I just hung around. And again, when you quit abusing alcohol and other mind-altering substances too, if you're doing that as well, you're physically going to get better. You're mentally going to get a little better. You're emotionally going to get a little better. You're going to have a little step up. And that's part of the delusion because you feel like you're making progress, you're doing fine, and you're not really doing any of the stuff that they're laying out there for us to do. And so I drug that out as long as I could so I couldn't drag it out anymore. And eventually I had to ask for help. And I finally asked this guy, Roy, to be my sponsor. And Roy lived right down the street from me. I could walk to his house. That's one of the reasons I asked him. I knew him. He knew me my whole sobriety. But I could walk to his house because I had a car, but it wasn't legal. It was held together by bumper stickers. You could look at my car and tell I was completely in spiritual warfare because literally the whole back of my car was bumper stickers. This half was live and let live. First things first. You know, all this God stuff on this side. The other side, just draw a line on the middle. The other side was, hey, you don't like the way I drive? Stay off the sidewalk. You know, there's stuff like that. You could just see the spiritual warfare just point blank on the back of my car. You could tell I was a very disturbed soul. But I couldn't drive. So I asked Roy, and I went to Roy's house, and I sat down, and really what came out of that conversation is what we'll spend the rest of the weekend talking about. But I can tell you in summary, this is how it went. I went down there, and I said, Roy, will you sponsor me? He says, sit down at this kitchen table. He says, you've been around almost 3 years now. Tell me about your life. I said, I'm 25, I'm going on 26. I don't have an education. I don't even have a GED. I got a criminal record. I don't have a license, and I'm probably never going to have a driver's license the rest of my earthly life. I live in a beat-up house up the street. I live in the basement of that house. I got a dead-end job. I said, Roy, my life sucks. That's my life. I haven't drank in 3 years, but my life sucks. Just take the word sucks, capitalize it, highlight it, italicize it, make a neon sign out of it. That's my life. And he was very graceful that day. He was very well known for not being that graceful, but he was graceful with me. He said, Harold, I'll listen to everything you had to say, and I'll be the first person to admit you've been dealt a really tough hand in your life. But I hope you're going to hear what I'm going to tell you. And I hope all of us hear what he had to tell me, because what he told me that night is true that night as it is right now, sitting here with you guys in Wisconsin at this retreat center. Nothing's changed, but everything. But the reality of what he told me was definitely the truth. He said, Harold, everything you have in your life right now, sitting here at my kitchen table, every single thing you got going on, you've attracted to you by the person that you become. And the day you're man enough to own that truth, is the day you're on your way to some real change in your life. But so you can own that truth, this vicious little cycle you're on, you're eventually going to drink again because you're not happy about your sobriety. You're a boy whistling in the dark. You'd do anything to drink and get away with it. And you know it. You're like a candle in the wind. Eventually that candle's going out, and you will find your way back to the sauce. Or you're going to do what your dad did. My dad was an alcoholic. And at age 54, He never found recovery. At age 54, he took his life. That's how my dad quit drinking. So you're going to do one or two things, man. You're either going to grow or you're going to go. And the million-dollar question is, what do you want to do? And that's a question every one of us had to answer at some point in our life. But as life goes on, it's not, you don't answer it just once. You answer it multiple times throughout your life, because you'll stand at the turning point one more time. The seasons of life will be upon you, and you know it's true. There's 4 big pillars in our life I experienced. The first one is birth. You don't get any say-so in that. Some people here sitting in this room that dealt some pretty tough hands in their life. Grew up pretty hard. Harder than I did. I suffered all the abuse, physical, mental, spiritual, sexual, all that stuff before I was even a teenager. I had a blame list as long as the Mississippi River while my life was jacked up, and a lot of co-signers to go with it. I had a pretty hard upbringing. I didn't get any say-so over that. That's the first pillar. But if you live long enough, you're going to get ill. And so are the people you care about. And you're going to stand at the turning point one more time. And if you live long enough, you're going to deal with aging. And not just you, but the people that you care about. And you're going to stand at the turning point one more time. And eventually we're all going to have to deal with death, not just for the people we love, but for ourselves. And you're going to stand there one more time. And these big moments, and there's several in between, will all challenge us, I think, as we stand there. So you're either going to grow or you're going to go. And what do you want to do? And I knew that he was going to say, let's work the steps. And I just didn't believe it would change my life. And it's been well documented and well said throughout the history of AA by a multitude of people that the hardest thing that any of us will ever do in recovery is take actions we don't believe in. And when you look at the 12 steps as a spiritual solution, as a design for living that really works, it really does. When you're full of individualism and you're full of materialism and you're full of consumerism, you're full of secularism, when you look at the steps on the wall, it just doesn't add up that that's going to change my life. Call me crazy, but I think I could be a little bit more spiritual if I had a few $100s in my pocket and a better-looking girl, or a girl at all, and at least a decent job and a place to live. Call me nuts, but I think I'd be a little bit more happy. Let's get real here. And that was my MO my whole life. And we live in a culture that breeds that. We live in the wild, wild west. From the time you're this tall, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be Peter Criss from KISS. I wanted to drive choppers and have muscles like Arnold Schwarzenegger's. And every girl that was on a swimsuit issue, Bo Derek, and 10 was hot when I was a kid. I wanted Bo Derek, I wanted muscles like Arnold, I wanted a chopper, and I wanted to play drums like Peter Criss. That's what I wanted in life. That's it. With the delusion that somehow or another that's going to take away the care, boredom, and worry in my life. How delusional is that? But that's how we all grow up. All human beings go through their life. All human beings going through life thinking about one thing more than anything, ourselves. And for us, it's a deadly game. That extreme self-obsession with me has to die. And this was the beginning of that surrender. There's lots of surrender. Some people had that surrender when they get here. There's people in that room, I promise you, that was their surrender. They came here, I'm done with the booze, I'm done with my life, I'm done with my name, I'm done with the zip code, I'm done with all of it. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. There's people sitting right here, that's their story. And they came all the way in, sat all the way down, and they've been here ever since. Some of them for over 40 years sitting here right now. But there's lots of people probably here today that are just like me, who did come in, who didn't want to leave, didn't want to drink anymore, but hadn't come to the end of themselves. I was far from it. And I had to ultimately hit that surrender in recovery. And so many people don't, unfortunately. They end up finding their way back out the door, and they never make it back here. Because if we drink, none of us can guarantee we'll ever draw a sober breath the rest of our life. None of us. Or we can end up like my dad. And I've watched that happen for countless people. So you're going to grow or you're going to go. And I was finally desperate enough that I finally started to work the steps, and it started to change my life. And it didn't happen in one big cataclysmic explosion, but little by little my life started to change. My sponsor, Tom Ivester from North Carolina, Tom had a great quote to define a miracle. And his definition was this: when preparation meets opportunity and God does the introduction, great things can happen in your life. But if you're not prepared for the opportunities, it isn't that the opportunities don't come. They're there. They just pass you by. Next. And I was never prepared for anything in my life. I was full of victimization and the delusion of impossibility and going down the line. All these things that held me back. The narrative that played in my head my entire life was still very loud in my life. And that's what had to change. And that's what we'll spend the weekend is unpacking that narrative and how those shifts happen for myself. John will share how they happen for you. We'll hear from you how it happened in your life and the side conversations and the one-on-ones. But it's that shit that has to happen. And if you're sitting here this weekend and you feel pretty stuck, or you're living the double life, but if you live here long enough, you've fallen into the double life at some point in your life. What does that look like? It looks like you got one foot in the dark and you got one foot in the light. And you got too much light in your life to really enjoy the dark, but you got way too much dark in your life to enjoy the light. And you're just kind of caught in the middle. It's a very lonely place to be. And the pride and the fear will eat you alive with years of sobriety sitting in that space. And I've been there, done that. And I know John has too. So we'll share some of that, how that came about in our life and where it unpacked this weekend. But that's where my journey started. What I can tell you, just to give you a snapshot today, I have a beautiful wife named Susie back in St. Louis, and I'm grateful she allows me to come to things like this, all this time away from her. I have a black lab named Coda, who's 9 years old, who just got a cone off her head because she had a big tumor in her ear that just got cut out. And I never saw a dog so resentful at her life, but she was pretty resentful wearing that cone. And I cut that off a couple of mornings ago, and she was liberated. She was paroled. We have 5 kids between us, 4 girls and 1 boy. Our oldest is 36, son, 4 girls. They're all great. All the kids are educated. They're all living incredible lives. We got my daughter, Danielle, who has 4 grandchildren, and they live in Colorado, live in Morrison, Colorado, right at the foot of the mountains at Red Rock Theaters where they live at, basically right on top of it. And 4 grandkids that you'll hear about this weekend. I'm as involved in Alcoholics Anonymous today as I've ever been in my entire life, and we'll talk about that. I've had a storybook life, and I know most of you have too. I've heard a lot of those stories tonight at dinner and just hanging out, just a short time I've been here. Some amazing men and some amazing stories, some amazing sobriety in this space. And I know I'll walk out of here better than I walked in this weekend. I'll walk out with more phone numbers, more lifelong friends. My circle will get wider. But this weekend is really just about us just being real, being transparent with the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no blue ribbons hanging off my wall. And there's none on John's, I can promise you. And hopefully we can really be transparent and just get down and not just dwell on the dark stuff. I mean, I'm just lift up the blessings that so many of us experienced, myself included. It's been an incredible life. It's the dope, man. It's just something I wouldn't want to change forever in my life. And I'm as involved today. And unfortunately, you run into a lot of old timers, a lot of senior members that will come up to you at conventions and those type of things and go, yeah, I used to do all those things. I used to do a lot of that kind of work you're talking about. And they're living off memories instead of imagination. And it fills my soul when I look out and see guys my senior that are still coming, still doing these things, still invested, not just for themselves, but the guys that are coming behind them. And it's great to see them up here. It's great to see what they're doing and countering and mixing and matching and doing all the things they do. That's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's inspiring to me. I met my friend here, 86 years old, 41 years sober, rocking it. Looks pretty darn good. I hope I look half that good when I'm 76, much less 86. But that's the inspiration we get here. We get these moments, these weekends, these long weekends together. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to spending the weekend with you. And hopefully all of us can walk out of here this weekend better than we walked in. Thanks for letting me share. That's all I got.